Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Leo Cloud, and I'm not that type of nerd. Today we are joined by our first guest, James, who is called James. One moment, please. We are experiencing technical difficulties, but none of you will know it because of editing. See, I'm smart. Except that I don't know how to edit at all. This podcast stuff is harder than I thought it would be. Are you guys still there?
See me well?
I can see you very well, but wait, before we start, I should put this on, just in case.
No, I refuse to do it under those circumstances. I will not cater to that kind of absurdity.
If you're not, James, if you're not going to cater to absurdities, I think you came to the wrong place, because that's half of what I do around here. Here, have a mask. Come on, just
cater to absurdity.
If you're not gonna wear the mask, at least let me put one on your image.
Exactly.
On the screen.
Exactly, right there, and perhaps it will protect you from my killing you. Yeah, exactly. We may be 9,000 miles away from each other.
No, we don't know how. I mean, we don't know how this plague works. So I just want to take every safety precaution.
Every precaution.
I mean, you can't be too safe if it just saves one life.
Absolutely not, yes.
I mean, it's
alone in my room. I need to wear a mask. Yeah,
of course. I wear a mask to the bathroom, but for a completely different reason.
Of course.
Completely different. So, I already introduced you as James, who is called James.
Yes. My code name.
That's your name.
My code name among ancient Jewish rebels or ancient Christians was James, who was called James. Right. Yeah.
And you are a hairstylist from France.
A hairstyle? Well, that's it. I'm Antoine from France, who does people's hair.
No, a hairstylist from France, because I looked it up on Google. I looked up James Valliant, and I found a hairstylist.
Really?
Oh, wait, but that guy is black. Oh, so gotta take these notes. These notes are gonna be useless. These notes are gonna be. So okay, I think I actually prepared for the hairstylist, but now that we have you here, it's kind of too late. So what do you have, like, books behind you? Or those books you like?
Well, yeah. Well, see.
Okay.
Well, my wife, the love of my life, is very publicity minded. She for a long time was a publicist, and so she refuses to allow me to do these things unless I have promotion for both of my books behind me. So yeah, it's a working bookshelf behind me, right? Those are the books that I mostly use. I have other books in storage upstairs and so forth, but these are the books I mostly use for my current work, and so it's a working library and office for me. Yeah. Also a set for podcast.
That's very good. This is my room. It has like a flower painting and something.
That's a lovely painting back there.
Thank you. So you actually wrote like 2 books. One of them is called Creating Christ. Now I'm not that type of nerd, so I don't know anything about nothing. So you're gonna have to explain. Really, we're gonna have to explain it to like an idiot, because that's what you're dealing with here. I'm sorry.
Well, but you're not an idiot. Fortunately, you're a few steps higher than that. So.
You'd be surprised. I mean, and if I'm not an idiot, there's probably an idiot or 2 watching, so we got to be considerate about it. If it enlightens one mind.
You have to cater to the true idiots out there who really don't have a clue.
So you wrote a book about the origins of this guy called Joshua.
Yes. Well, even that's a controversial thing, because whether or not Jesus means Joshua, and that's the Greek form of it, is assumed to be a form of Yeshua, an original Hebrew name, hero right, of Hebrew legend.
Who are the Hebrews again?
Whose name Moses
Right.
actually back in Torah, Moses names his successor, Hoshea, Joshua, because he will be the salvation of
The
Yahweh.
Salvador, okay.
Yahweh saves. So it is a messianically significant name. And in that sense, even though it appears to be a common name in the first century, it is both messianically suspicious if it has that root. And then, of course, there's a minority of people who think that it comes from some other origin altogether. The Greek form, Jesus, as we call it in English, comes from something else altogether.
So what do we call him? So what do we call him? Can we call him Shlomo?
Brian?
No, Brian, right? Brian, I like that name. That's better than what I had from Shlomo.
Brian was called Brian.
Right. Brian was called Brian.
Right. Well, yeah. See, and the other thing is that people are given in Christian literature, first century Christian literature, people are given second names. So Saul becomes Paul, Simon becomes Peter.
I have a friend named Saul, and he's gonna actually I have a friend called Saul. He's waiting just outside the door, and he's gonna come up in a second. You guys wait. He's gonna come up. You're gonna love him. I promise.
Well, very good. I hope he doesn't change his name on us or anything.
No, well, he says
he's a slippery character like that.
I mean, his name is Saul from that sandy shithole, but he called himself Paul from Dune. He's Paul from Dune, but he's
Paul
Saul.
Muad'Dib.
No, Muad'Dib is someone else.
The Messiah from Arrakis.
No, that's what he's gonna tell you. That's what you're gonna believe. But we're gonna see him later.
Okay.
So how would you describe because some people don't know a lot about Christianity like me. They have the previous version. It's like not having, you have an iPhone and you can't download an app because you have the previous version, and some people just don't have iPhones. So how would you describe Christianity?
Describe Christianity? Some
people don't know. Believe it or not, my mother doesn't know who Darth Vader is. Like, really, I spent my whole life looking for people who don't know what Star Wars is. I spoke with primitives from the Amazon jungle, Buddhist monks, people, you name it. They all know who Star Wars is. They're like, dude, I'm a bit isolated, but come on. And then I go to my mom, and they make a joke with Star Wars. I don't even remember. It says, what are we talking about? Star Wars. What is that?
It's a good question. I suppose there are people who are completely unfamiliar even with the idea of Christianity. Christianity is, of course, a religion, but it's a broad umbrella name for many sects of a single religion that believes in the divinity and the salvation effect of the death, the alleged crucifixion in the first century of a fellow named Jesus. The four Gospels that we possess, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were only really four biographies written in the ancient world of this guy, and many of them very, very contradictory, but they tell a very miraculous tale of a fellow who was born of a virgin, performed miracles, taught a very distinctive philosophy that was unusual for Jewish rabbis of the first century, and was crucified as a result of his conflicts with the Jewish authorities, reluctantly by the Roman governor, but that he resurrected from the dead, and that his resurrection itself provides the means by which humans can be saved from their state of inherent unworthiness to enter into immortality. And so the idea of Christianity is that the death and resurrection of Jesus actually opened the gates for us imperfect sinning mortals to have a better afterlife. That's the general umbrella theology that most Christianity, in fact, all Christianity shares.
All Christianity has that as a basic. You go to a Christian,
exactly.
You ask him, do you know
They'll
this?
vary in all kinds of other ways. And they were varying in all kinds of other ways. I think we need to focus is that 2,000 years ago, in the first century and second century, there was a giant revolt when the Roman Empire was expanding and finally got to the far eastern Mediterranean and began to dominate politics. It took over Syria and began to dominate politics in Judea. It took over Egypt. At that moment, and they were trying to hold back their enemies, the Parthians. The Jewish people revolted against Rome. And they revolted against Rome fundamentally for religious reasons. We're told that by the first century Jewish historian Josephus, who said that the messianic prophecies, in Hebrew scripture, Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, those kind of messianic prophecies were the main motivation for the Jewish war that broke out in 66 of the year 66 of the Common Era. It resulted in the destruction of the Second Temple in 70, reducing it to the Wailing Wall that it is today.
Yes.
Josephus tells us that this cataclysmic war in Judea may have cost up to 1 million lives. He may be exaggerating, but he reports that it cost 1 million lives, which would make it a massive war for in the ancient context. Even pagan historians of the early 2nd century, like Tacitus and Suetonius, tell us that the primary motivation for this war were the messianic prophecies of the Hebrew people.
Right.
Being monotheists, being sectarian monotheists, they had a hard time assimilating into the wider Hellenistic and Roman worlds after the conquests of Alexander, a Greek, and after the Romans got there, assimilating. And that's what led, frankly, to the 2nd century BC Maccabean revolt that's celebrated in Hanukkah, sort of a pushing out of Greek influence when these Hellenistic Greek Syrians came in, took over and desecrated the temple. And the Maccabeans led a revolt and pushed those guys out, cleansed the temple, and at least for a time had the last kingdom of Judea, in fact, the last independent nation of Judea, into the founding of Israel in the 20th century.
So that's like the crawl when you see Star Wars and you see that's the long crawl of what
that's
happened.
That's the movie crawl. There was this great.
Yes.
There was the first rebellion that occurred between 66 and 70. It really didn't finish up till 73 with the famous assault on Masada, where rather than be captured by the Romans, the population committed mass suicide.
Oh my God. And then there was the sequel.
That's the sequel. There's still more rebellion and unrest after the turn of the 2nd century. And then by the 120s AD, we're having a whole new Jewish revolt around 130 AD. And that, of course, is put down too. And that leads the Romans to just legally expel Jews from Judea, enforcing the diaspora, as I say, and for about 2,000 years until the creation of Israel after World War II.
Right. But James, look, I really appreciate it, but I don't really like what you're doing. You just took the plot of Star Wars and combined it with Life of Brian and tried to sell it. I might not know a lot, but come on, you just took those two and combined them together. I feel very disrespected right now.
Well, we know something about the ideology of the rebels.
Oh, okay.
And we know this inferentially in some ways, and we also know
use the Schwartz. I heard the Schwartz is really big with these guys.
The Schwartz is big, yes.
The Schwartz is strong in this one.
The Schwartz is strong with this one.
Right.
Exactly. I won't boast about my Schwartz here, but in any event, we know something about the ideology of the Jewish rebels.
Who are the Jews? Some people don't know this.
This is true too. This is true too. One of the most ancient surviving religions that still exist on Earth,
right?
Is the Hebrew faith.
Oh, so these guys are still around?
It's still around. I mean, its major literature came into being, 2,500 years ago, and it's referring back to a kingdom period during the Iron Age, and then in a very, very legendary way to figures who founded it, Abraham, Moses, who were founders of monotheism and the Jewish religion. But that's largely recognized as legendary, even though there may be a historical basis.
Oh, I know who these guys are. They're the Gepids. No, they're not the Gepids.
Not the Gepids.
Okay,
you mean the Gepids of at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire?
Not these guys.
Lepid, the Gepids as opposed to the Lombards and the Ostrogoths.
Yeah. No.
I don't know. Much.
Are they the Buryats? Are they the Buryats?
Fortunately, you're talking to someone who basically has Western history memorized by heart.
Well, are they the Buryats?
I'm sorry?
Are they the Buryats?
No.
You don't know those ones? They live in East Russia, Mongolia.
There are various theories, but all joking aside, there are various theories about the emergence of monotheism among the Hebrew people. There are various theories that perhaps a range of local people got together, people of both Egyptian and Sumerian influence. And as time wore on, their ethnic identity was forged by fighting common enemies like the Phoenicians. But the true monotheism really didn't emerge until even though Abraham and Moses are said to be strict monotheists, according to the Tanakh and the Torah, that's later literature written only about 2,500 years ago.
Oh, just 2,500 years. That's not that long.
I'm sorry?
That's 2,500 years. That's not that long. It's like happened yesterday.
It's got 400 or 500 years, some of it. At least 200 to 500 years on the New Testament, that's for sure. But it's also much more ancient in what it's harkening back to. It's obviously based on much earlier legend and history of the Hebrew people.
Oh, so I know these people out there. That's Surau of South America.
But the distinctive feature of Judaism is monotheism, and a sectarian kind of monotheism that connects it with their ethnicity. We are God's chosen people.
God I know these people. I happen to have a few relatives of these.
We have a special contract with God.
Right.
It began with Abraham saying, if you circumcise the young males, then you're part of this promise that I have, that Abraham's seed will be numberless as, and he will be a blessing to all nations.
No, that's the Chinese and the Indians. You got that wrong. Like, I don't want to call, like, no, these guys should go to whoever got to, like, you're a lawyer, right?
Yes. A trade lawyer, yes.
You should go to these guys should go to you and they say, hey, we got ripped off in this contract. We want whatever the Indians and the Chinese and the Hispanics got. I mean, that fulfills it. I mean, come on. Okay, I happen to know who the Jews are. I have a lot of relatives. My aunt and uncle. And
you just happen to know a couple of Jews, do you?
And my brother, and my mother, and my father, and my grandmother, and my grandmother, and my grandfather, and my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. They happen to be Jews too.
A relatively close community.
Yes.
The result of enormous persecution by the majority cultures in which Judaism has been forced to live over the last 2,000 years within Christian or Muslim societies, where to varying degrees of acceptance they've had to live. And this has turned what is today Judaism into a sort of a sectarian ethnic movement, because they're a closed community. In any event, getting back to Christianity and Judaism.
Why? This is fun.
It's obviously a distinct religion.
Right.
It is not Judaism. And many of the differences between Christianity and Judaism sharply and suddenly emerged in the first century, exactly during the period of this Jewish war. So it strikes me as no coincidence that a peaceful, non-nationalist, non-Torah Orthodox,
non-racist,
let's put it generously, non-sectarian.
A racist. I'm sorry. Look, God's chosen people. You're better than all the. Yeah.
I won't deny that there were certain, and in fact, there appears to be evidence that there were certain groups of Jews at the time who were, in effect, Israel only. You have to literally be a descendant of Abraham or Israel, or you just ain't part of the deal.
Of a guy who lived a very long time ago where Nazis existed.
No, that's it. And you should be able to prove that you're actually this guy's
And
descendant.
If not, you got to cut a bit of your cock off. Literally.
That's it. And
no, really,
the ones who would accept conversion into Judaism at the time, they would require for full admission males, and for adult males, that's obviously a very serious condition, to be circumcised as an adult male, not something a lot of people would consent to, but some people did. There was a wider group of people, perhaps in the first century, called God-fearers, who were interested in worshiping and respecting Yahweh, the Jewish God, but without going all the way into being members of Israel by following circumcision and perhaps other strict aspects of the kosher lifestyle.
Okay. Why? Why would anyone join this thing? I mean, I've read. No, really, I've read the terms and conditions.
That's actually a good argument. Why were many Gentiles, many Goy, were in fact attracted to Judaism
because of the jokes
during the Roman period? There was, let's put it this way, within their pagan world, there was an emerging fusion of gods going on, called a movement called
Amon-Ra and
your sun god is our sun god. Your healing God is our healing God. right? Your fertility god is our fertility god.
They're the same archetype as a mythologist would say. They share the archetype.
Exactly.
I'm not a
and
Jungian,
you've got
by the way.
philosophical movements going on too. Some quite secular, like Epicurus, but much more ancient even. Plato, who's saying, yes, well, this world of appearance is really just a world of appearance. This other dimension where things are perfect and unified is the real dimension. And therefore, this material world is kind of corrupt and lowly.
James, enough. You're just ripping off the plot of The Matrix again. You know, you're really exploiting the fact that I don't know too much about popular culture, but I'm not as idiotic as you might think I am.
I know you're not.
Okay.
No, Platonic dualism, though, itself was tending towards monotheism. Plato envisioned in this world of forms, the form of the good being like a sun from which all other ideas and perfection emanates.
Sun is the thing in the sky.
Merged. So this sort of created a philosophical monotheism that was emerging by the Roman times, for sure, as Neoplatonic ideas were gaining in popularity. Pagan Roman writers like Virgil or Seneca will sometimes speak of God in the singular. And they weren't Jews at all.
No, maybe they were just tired of listing all of them, so they just put one, to save writing the S.
Exactly. And for political reasons, the Roman government was kind of encouraging a monotheistic development. They had a multi-ethnic, multinational empire with a variety of religious views under their umbrella. And to culturally unify their empire, they were seeking a common idea, perhaps a single god, or at least a limited number of gods, or a single faith that could culturally and politically unify their very, very diverse empire. So for various reasons, monotheism was becoming attractive.
But James, you're just copying now the plot of Dune and the Bene Gesserits. I know I might have been born at night, but I wasn't born last night.
Jewish monotheism probably emerged for historical reasons.
Yes.
When they were conquered by the Assyrians and the Jews and their great kingdoms, which had lasted for
I have a different idea about that. I subscribe to the notion that Judaism started as a development of henotheism that failed in Egypt, and the priesthood, the Hierophants, the Cohens, got exiled, and they had to pull off their stick somewhere else in Judea or in Palestine or in Canaan, or whatever that would be.
Akhenaten tried to bring the soul worship, the single worship of the Aten, the sun, as the one God, and the idea that somehow, way back in dynastic Egypt, there was this unusual period where a pharaoh tried to do some funky monotheistic things with sun religion.
It was because he didn't deny the other gods. He just said, well, only one god should be venerated. All of the other ones.
That's really a very important and subtle distinction. But that is the sort of thing that will start, our major god is so important that all these other gods become angels. They become demons.
Oh, okay.
They become lesser spiritual forces, definitely under the hierarchy of the Almighty Creator.
Also, it's important to note that the creator for polytheist was not the creator who created the world. The creation of the world in polytheistic religions was an explanation of how the world came to be under events currently seen. All of this is supposed to be contemporary to the people passing down the myth. That part is clear.
That's it. A lot of our pagan creation myths are very fascinating in this way. The gods do not create the universe. The universe creates the gods. The universe was
created before it. The gods just do stuff.
The gods emerge within the universe. Right. So, and a lot of their stories, the classic story from Hesiod's Theogony, are very organic in origin. I don't mean to be, sort of sexually graphic here, but Father Sky lies on top Mother Earth. His fluids rain down into her cracks, and out springs life. So it's an organic, sort of biological, biocentric view of creation.
Except that,
and how all creation really, and the gods themselves are the descendants of sky and earth.
Do you believe that? The creation myths or all of the gods and the myths? I should focus more on the myths. For me, myths. Well, first we should agree on this. Are myths trying to explain an event that you have no understanding of?
Of course.
Okay, and that's what's bizarre. Or take the pandemic we are facing now and all the mythologies facing it, all of the bizarre...
Wonderful analogies, really wonderful analogies.
Well, I
People,
try.
when you don't really understand something, it is in effect mythology for them. But people need philosophy. They need
an explanation.
They need some, so they'll reach out for these kind of explanations. And what's interesting is that what we have in Genesis, what we have at the start of the Torah, is a very, in my view, advanced view of the creation of the universe. It's not an organic one like Father Sky and Mother Earth. God is like a king.
Are we talking about one, the Genesis A, or Genesis Aleph, or Genesis Bet? Because there are two.
I'm talking about the general conception.
Okay.
Of both.
Okay.
God's word is all powerful. The word of God is what creates the universe. So the analogy.
James, you're now copying Lord of the Rings.
That's it. No, Tolkien was inspired by
I know
Christian creation ideas. Very much so.
Did he pay them royalties?
And so the spirit of the Aenir, right, are really emanations of the singing, the song, right? That the God sings, and that his lesser God sings, comes into being, as if the word, the song, is what creates existence. That's what Ayn Rand would call the primacy of consciousness.
Okay, I think I know about that.
But in any event, the Yahweh in the beginning of Genesis isn't organically mating or bringing something into the world that way. He, like a king, his words, his command, God said, let there be light, and there was light, and it was good, so he was happy.
And Tohu and Bohu.
So the word becomes extremely important to the Jewish faith. You know, the prayer, phylacteries that you'll put on your head or some other part of your body.
I know
prayers. As if we're putting prayers in the cracks of the Wailing Wall, as if the words themselves have, and this had a huge impact on Jewish and Christian thought. The magician will say abracadabra to make the magic happen. So as if words or spells, incantations, or in the Islamic world, the Arabian Nights, how does he open the cave? Open sesame. It's words that have this magical power. And so the veneration of the very text becomes an incredibly important part of Judaism. And because they are monotheists, at least at a certain point, when we have to explain disaster and failure, the conquest of the Babylonians, for example, could God possibly be rewarding these pagan polytheists?
Okay.
No.
Wait. Let's back up a bit.
He must be punishing us for failing to live up to the covenant. And that's exactly how Hebrew scripture presents it. Prophets come in warning Jewish kings, you're sinning, you're bowing down to idols. Woe to you, bad things are coming.
Yeah.
And only if you clean up your ways and get closer to Torah, will you then get back and get your temple back.
There are still rabbis who say that Hitler came to be because Jews have not been very good in Europe. There are still rabbis that say that. It's true.
Like they say that America is being punished for its decadence through 9/11 and stuff. The religious worldview is horrific.
Because it imagines,
it imagines that God really is the omnipotent creator in control. If that's so, then what is happening when bad things happen to people? It must be God is punishing them. Even if we're worshipers of that God, somehow he can't be rewarding our enemies. He's punishing us.
Right.
And so this kind of guilt is sort of built in to
Jewish guilt. I know that. I know about that. My mother uses it on me very much.
And so what Christianity is offering is a way of expiating this inherent guilt.
So this is a way of making a religion out of the guilt Catholic and Jewish mothers put on their used to control their family.
Bingo. No matter what sins practically you've committed, you can still find the prodigal son can still come home and be still loved by Yahweh despite his sinning ways, because he's corrected his relationship with God. The sacrifice of this perfect being, Jesus, instead of the sacrificial lamb at Passover, we sacrifice a human lamb. He now stands as the redemption.
So that's like the upgrade.
Allow the angel of death to pass over us.
Well, it's the sequel, and in the sequel, you gotta just up the stakes. It's just not.
Up the stakes.
Last time we saved the world, now we gotta save the universe.
But you'll notice that in the first century, we have a radical elbow in Jewish thought when it comes to Christianity. They are chucking circumcision.
Right.
That's not important anymore.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
It's criticized in fundamental ways. Kosher diet isn't important anymore.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Sabbath observance isn't important.
That's also okay.
Or keeping Yom Kippur or any of the high holy days. So when in effect, all the distinctive features of Judaism are thrown out the window, and all that's left are the worship of the one almighty creator God and these messianic prophecies, in effect.
So it's like Disney Star Wars, where they just take Star Wars. Right. No, really, they just remove everything except the huge money at the box office. Like, no, really, I mean, they just rewrote everything. Like, so suddenly the Palpatine succeed, the good guys are bad.
Right. But that's exactly right.
That's exactly the point. Okay.
So in effect, what we have is all of a sudden in the first century,
right.
Torah is being criticized, Jewish nationalism and exceptionalism,
racism,
right? Militancy of the rebels is being criticized, and so it seems to me kind of obvious. We may not be able to know a lot because it is ancient and fragmentary, this evidence. But one thing that does strike me from the 30,000 meter elevation is that Christianity in the New Testament represents a critical reaction to the militant, Torah Orthodox, nationalist rebels, Jewish rebels of the first 2 centuries.
Rebel scum.
What? Well, in effect, well, look, we're talking 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
Both sides, there was no such thing as freedom of speech and an idea that there shouldn't be any. I mean, what the Jews were arguing for was a kind of Sharia law, going back to a strict governance.
Also, I just want to point out that it's not true that this happened because they were ruled by Goyim, or they were ruled by non-Jews. They were pissed because they were ruled by secular people, because today they're in Israel, which I happen to have heard of, there are people living in religious communities where their ruler or their people who hold office are as Jewish as they are, but they enforce secular laws. And they don't like it, so they don't follow any of it.
Interesting.
So, so the part that it's because they're non-Jews. It's nothing to do with the ethnicity. It's because they are secular.
Right.
Because,
Mosaic law should be sufficient, right?
Because a religious worldview will never submit to a secular authority under.
Getting back to Christianity, it seems to me that
we have to?
You can't have a sudden sweeping change of this kind within Judaism organically, and that this Jewish war really was the proximate cause of such an opposite reaction to the militant rebel Jews at the time. There were educated Jews at the time who were working closely with the Romans, who wanted to get along with the Roman Empire. And in my view, those are your most likely candidates for the authors of early Christian literature.
Okay. Is this a conspiracy theory? And I don't mean conspiracy theory as, I don't know, something stupid that's implausible. I mean, is it people conspiring together and joining forces, not in a clandestine way, in order to influence the war they are in? That's what I mean by conspiracy. That's the most bare bones.
Well, you know, Seneca, the first century Roman philosopher, who was
I know him. I met him yesterday.
No, I'm kidding. Well, he died almost 2,000 years ago, killed by this Emperor Nero, at least forced to suicide. Anyway, he was a leading minister of state for Nero in his first years. And he understood that religions were simply believed by the masses, but were useful to politicians.
That's Dune again. Oh, wait.
The Emperor Vespasian, there was so much religious propaganda surrounding the first century Emperor Vespasian. Anyone reading Suetonius can see that just about every religion of the Mediterranean world was trying to acclaim Vespasian to be some God-favored man or a god.
Who is Vespasian? Is Vespasian, just very quick?
A Roman emperor of the first century.
Okay.
And there was so much religious ritual surround. He and his son were the guys who defeated the Jews in the first Jewish war. Titus was the guy that managed the siege of Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, reducing it to the Wailing Wall it is today.
So
Titus,
Darth Vader, okay.
In much of the Talmud, is a very evil figure. Right.
So he's the Darth Vader of the story. Okay.
He's the Darth Vader, yes, exactly, of the story. Although Christians regard the Flavians, Vespasian, and Titus in a very positive way.
All the way through.
I mean, Mozart wrote an opera called The Mercy of Titus. La Clemenza del Tito, one of his more famous operas. So the Flavians were viewed in Christian culture in a very positive way. Whereas, of course, to Jews, they were the destroyers of the temple, and as bad as things get.
Okay.
So there's this political conflict. And in those days, now you asked me, it's a conspiracy theory. In those days, there was no division really between religion and politics. So even if you had only vaguely religious ideas, like Seneca, who speaks of God, say, in the singular, and knows that religion is politically useful to the rulers, even he is trying to understand this in a metaphysically religious way. And everyone else certainly has to interpret these political events through religion. Why did the Romans win? It's like asking why did the Babylonians
weren't there any
defeat us
secular people
years?
in this story? I mean, the Greeks were pretty famous for being, not secular. I mean, weren't there people like that?
Secularism had reached a sort of peak during the Hellenistic period.
Okay.
And from this point forward, and in fact, it had been going on for some time, an emergence of Neoplatonic dualism and mysticism was on the rise. It was impacting Stoicism. It was really impacting Judaism in Philo. And it would be, and philosophers like, Plotinus were developing a whole new Neoplatonic school that was very monotheistic in nature.
I'm very interested in this Epictetus guy. I really like his name. I think I might not be getting what I'm thinking.
So that it just seems to me that elbow about nationalism, militancy, Torah orthodoxy, sectarianism, all changing in Judaism all at once, introducing a man god, very, very alien to monotheistic Judaism. Here's this man on earth who was God. That's a very pagan idea.
Yeah.
So all of these radical changes within Judaism were not organic within Judaism, nor is it an accident, that it all happened at the time of the Jewish War. My thesis in creating Christ here, is just that.
Yes.
Yeah, that it's not really. Well, look at what happened in American politics with the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963.
I wasn't alive back then.
He was almost deified.
Yeah, and everyone's a saint after they die. That's what they say. I know a guy who.
No, I mean, you ask people their popular perceptions, they're very sometimes subtly different and sometimes quite different from the actual reality.
Okay, so another question.
But that's basically my theory of Christianity.
Why do you think
the pro-Roman Jews in the first 2 centuries were attempting, in effect, to pacify the Jewish rebels?
Okay.
And it wasn't as though it was a conspiracy simply to pacify them.
So Christianity was the
They really did want in other words, the authors of the New Testament may not have believed it literally, but they did believe it allegorically.
And they started,
okay. And it was quickly forgotten what the political proximate motive for it, the Jewish war. And once that was forgotten, there's a whole, now suddenly Christianity becomes an otherworldly form of idealism.
So it runs out of
connection from once we disconnect it from the first century Jewish war, the politics of the time, it becomes inexplicable. It becomes sort of a, gosh, what an idealistic guy who'd say, turn the other cheek and love your enemy.
Okay. I have 2 other points I want to mention before we get into something way more important. I mean, come on. But I have the Romans have done this. You've said before, the Romans have done this to various religions in the Near East and Europe and wherever. But those ones are kind of simple. I mean, you don't have to work too much to get them. They're similar. But you meet something like Judaism, and that's a completely...
Well, like I said earlier, the truth is Judaism did provide the Roman Empire with their biggest political challenge. I think, culturally and propagandistically. But the Romans were using religion and ideology in a propagandistic way. On Roman coins in the first century, for example, you'll have certain ideas being deified, like mercy or compassion, clementia.
Oh, that you don't want to get clementia.
Right.
Oh,
Well, clementia means mercy. We get the word clemency in English.
And
Mercy or compassion. And or take Pax Orbis Terrarum, peace on earth. Or spes, hope.
Huh?
Many ideas that are featured in the New Testament are in fact reflected in standard Roman political propaganda, which you can read on their coinage.
So,
indicating, in my view, the very ideas of the Romans and those fighting the rebels are a major part of the Christian agenda itself.
So,
so in effect, it was an intentional effort at pacification without necessarily being some grand conspiracy. I think that no one at the end of the first century could have read, or the beginning of the second, could have read Christian literature and not seen the political allegory that underlied it. That does not mean that the authors, in one sense, didn't sincerely believe it at some level.
Right, because it can be.
Now,
okay.
Did they want it to be taken literally by the masses? I think so.
Okay.
Did they treat it merely allegorically? Probably. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't a level of sincerity on everybody's side, because everybody is trying to understand the politics of the time in a theological context,
So
giving a religious explanation for why the Jews are being defeated.
Okay.
Right.
So you're telling me instead of making a big Death Star to blow up the rebels, they made a big ideological Death Star to pacify everyone. Okay. So Christianity is the Death Star of the Roman Empire against the Jewish and against the
Jewish nationalism.
Ideology.
Exactly. Christianity represents a targeted religious psyops campaign, right? One thing that has to be borne in mind is that Jews in the Roman world had already, there was a huge diaspora already underway. There were Jews living in Rome. There was a huge population of Jews in Alexandria, Egypt. There were Jews in Syria. There were Jews in different Greek communities. And so when the Jewish war broke out, Judaism represented not just a problem in one little province in the Far East, it represented an empire-wide problem that required an ideological solution to redirect Jewish messianic ideas into a pro-Roman, pro-pagan direction.
And that's the Death Star.
And that's the Death Star.
No, really.
Even within Christianity, though, you have huge variation from the start. There are contradictions between what are thought of as the authentic Pauline letters and the Gospels. And each of the Gospels have major differences between themselves. Whatever Mark did wasn't satisfactory to Matthew. He had to correct it and change it.
I never read any of the Gospels. I have to say that in advance.
Well, you are in a blessed state.
I just watched for me, the prequels.
No, go on.
For me, the sequels don't.
The prequels.
No, because I just prefer. I'm from the few people that must prefer the prequels and like that.
Well, the prequels appear very much in the New Testament. The Gospels themselves are basically they're not using some first century source about a human named Jesus. They're repairing to Hebrew literature. They're going back not just to the prophets, but they're reworking stories from Genesis, Joshua, and
who is
Jonah.
Also named Yoruba. Joshua also has a name that has Baal in it, and Baal is a non-kosher god.
Baal was the great enemy, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the guy who saved all of us, the cool guy, has Baal in his name, and the cool guy has also Baal in his name.
Oops.
How do we retcon that? How do we how Lucas made Han suit first, Han suit second?
I have this feeling that you don't want to talk about Christianity.
I do.
How it emerged from Judaism. You want to talk about Star Wars.
Well, I happen to, but I have one last thing I want to ask. Why did because guys watching this, I have a huge revelation that's bigger than all of this. I mean, this is Penny's. Like, we all know that for nerds, or at least for most of us, Star Wars is the real religion. I mean.
Right.
I'm partly joking, but it's true for a lot of people.
No, I've actually heard stories about people who try to live the Jedi philosophy.
We'll get to that in a second. But why, if there were all these competing ideologies trying to be the next monotheistic, the next front for monarchy, philosophical idealism. Why did Judaism win? And what does it have to do with a certain individual called Josephus Flavius?
Well, first of all, they were the first serious monotheists.
Okay.
Right, and so as pagans are sort of pagans take their sweet time to develop.
No, wait, there were the Brahmins.
Philosophy, a kind of monotheism.
Wait, no, there were the Brahmins before the Jews.
Well, yeah.
So my idea that why the Jews won out is why the Brahmins won out. They were really, really desperate for work. I mean, these guys just didn't have any other thing. I mean, I usually say have communication with the divine. Will travel. Will work for food. No, these guys didn't have anything. I mean,
in certain Hasidic communities, right? You should be familiar. Essentially, they don't work.
They don't work.
What they do
I
is
work
study
for them.
Torah.
I work for them. I pay taxes that goes to them.
Well, there are communities in Brooklyn. Authorities are treated with such respect. They don't do anything but study Torah.
Right. No, here it's all of them. Even the guys who aren't even good at it, they just study Torah.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe someone is gonna go work if he's not good and you need the money, but. No, really, I'm joking. They have a ton of kids. Yeah, he's considered the black sheep of the family. He's actually doing a job. He seems to be good at it, which is okay, but he's the black sheep.
He actually has a job. He works with it.
No, I think I would like to study more the Brahmins, and if any Brahmin is watching out, or someone who is knowledgeable about Brahmin, call him, not me.
It has not been. You're sending him to me. Well, the truth is, to have a top religious caste is analogous in Judaism, right?
Yes.
There is the priestly, Levitical, Cohenite sort of.
No, it's the Cohens who are the Hierophants and the Levites, which are the escorts. And that's the same word you use for escorts as in the prostitutes. It's not that funny. I mean, they had the escorts.
You're disrespectful of your own people.
No, they owned it. They owned it. Trust me, I know it. They owned it. I know it pretty well, and they've seen the results. And guys, let's try something else. Let's just give away with this idea and try something else. If we gave it a shot, let's just be a normal country.
But within old Judaism, there was a religiously ethnic elite, just like the Brahmins.
No, but here's the thing. I don't think there was a tribe of Israel. I think there was just the other people these Hierophants managed to convince are part of us. I have a very low opinion of this Cohenistic people, but it's okay because I'm related to them.
It's very easy to imagine that 12 disparate groups that may not have been ethnically identical at all, or they may have basically emerged from this Aramaean,
this mismatch. Like,
exactly.
I mean, some of them even have. Some of them even have Philistine names and features. Like David is a redhead. How many redheads do you see coming from the Near East? Hint, none.
Right. But there were European invaders like the Phoenicians.
Oh, the Phoenicians were European?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Yeah. If they're coming from
Asia they're from Turkey. They're from Turkey is part of Europe. Turkey is part of Europe. We don't think about that
right.
now.
Okay.
No, right. Turkey is part of Europe. It's hard to remember.
The Middle East, of course, has been the great crossroads, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It is not uncommon to find, Egyptian, Northern African influences, Indian, perhaps Southern Asian influences, and European, and North Central Asian influences. All of these could be having an impact on the various groups. That's why the Middle East is such a rich primordial soup for religion. State of culture. When Columbus got here, the high-end culture, the Aztecs, were engaged in human sacrifice. They were ripping hearts out of hundreds of children at the top of temples and watching the blood come down to appease, Quetzalcoatl. So they were at a different, in my view, different stage of religious development.
We don't know. I don't know that for sure. I mean, look, it's possible to retard back. I mean, that's the one thing I can tell you for sure.
I suppose it is. I
don't know enough. I really would want to know. If anyone here knows is been a sacrifice,
let us know.
If anybody here has been sacrificed or sacrificed to Quetzalcoatl, call that guy, not me.
But you see, it seems to me that it's clear that the Greeks and the Hebrews emerged from people who did engage in human sacrifice. We have the story of Abraham and Isaac,
Yes.
You don't need to tell someone not to kill their own children unless they're killing their own children, it seems to me. Oh, and by the way, don't sacrifice children to the gods or God.
Especially your children. that does
no, but in fact, it was in effect a moral tale about obeying God no matter what.
Yes.
Emerges from an original tale that was simply designed to say, don't sacrifice children to gods anymore.
Oh, okay. Okay, so these things get like an upgrade. They get like an evolution, like in Pokemon, where the thing of you don't know what Pokemon is.
I do.
You do.
I'm not an expert.
They're animals who undergo metamorphosis and become more complex.
Right. Right.
And you gotta catch
them
all.
In Greek mythology, we have the same thing. By classical times, human sacrifice is abhorrent to them. They would never think of sacrificing humans to the gods. But we have the story of Agamemnon, who led the Greeks in the Trojan War, had to sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia, to the goddess Artemis to get favorable winds so that they could even get to Troy. So that there's evidence that in the late Bronze Age, the Greeks were still engaged in human sacrifice. So both Greek and Jewish culture, I think, emerged from cultures that engaged in human sacrifice, but that had to incorporate moral tales that suddenly said, no, we don't do that anymore.
Okay. Actually, there is very little human sacrifice in the Odyssey, in the Iliad. I mean, there is killing people. Huh?
The Iliad does not refer. You look at the wider Trojan cycle tales. A lot of them involve. For example, we're told that the victorious Greeks sacrificed Trojans at pagan temples.
Yes.
That Ajax's killing of a certain Trojan princess actually led to Ajax the Lesser, led to an entire series of curses on the Greeks.
I call him Little Ajax. Come on, it's cool. Go with the Stanley Lombardo transition where he tries to make it look like the Expendables. It's better. No, really, it is. It's the best translation ever because it's freaking fun. It's like, hey, call Big Ajax. We need some backup over here. I was like, oh, that works.
Yeah.
Which is probably how the Greeks would have.
We have the Tantalus story in Greek mythology. He invites the gods to a feast.
And the Minotaur.
What?
The Minotaur. He was also a sacrifice.
Oh, the Minotaur. The Minotaur isn't so much a human sacrifice story, is it?
No, the Minotaur isn't getting sacrificed. People are getting.
Serves his own son to the gods.
Yeah.
What's that but a human sacrifice? We're told that the gods rejected it, except the fertility goddess who ate a piece of the shoulder of the boy. Fascinating. So when they put the boy together to resurrect him, they have to put an ivory shoulder on him. And this is the guy Pelops, who gives his name to the whole Peloponnesian Peninsula.
Okay. Well, the Spartans.
So both human sacrifice and cannibalism appear to be ubiquitous in Stone Age cultures. We probably all mostly descend from cannibals and human sacrificers. There came a point when Greek and Jewish religion said, no, we don't do that anymore.
Okay.
But notice what Jesus is. He's a giant sacrifice.
You know, screw sacrificing, you're having a BBQ. We're going to really put you in a bad mood. Somehow this is actually worse. Okay, so we talked a lot.
The Mosaic Law substitutes the older tradition of human sacrifice with a whole range of animal sacrifices.
Okay,
right? They're required at the right time.